live in interesting times.
On tonight's headlines.
The death toll from a huge blaze in Northern California rose to 44, making it the deadliest wildfire in state history.
Israelis and Palestinians take cover and fear another war as airstrikes flatten buildings in the Gaza Strip. Rockets hits houses and other structures in southern Israel.
Singaporean Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong says during the ASEAN 2018 summit opening ceremony that ASEAN nations are still able to work together despite countries, including major powers, are repudiating multilateral approaches.
And Marvel legend Stan Lee, who revolutionized pop culture as the co-creator of iconic superheroes like Spider-Man and the Hulk, who now dominate the world's movie screens, dies at the age of 95.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. The death toll from a huge blaze in Northern California rose to 44, making it the deadliest wildfire in state history. Thousands of firefighters spent a fifth day digging battle lines to contain the Camp Fire in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains north of Sacramento, while search teams were on a grim mission to recover the dead. Sheriff Cory Honea said the blaze is the deadliest wildland fire in California history. The Camp Fire is the largest of several infernos that have sent 250,000 people fleeing their homes across the tinder dry state, with winds of up to 60 miles per hour fanning the fast-moving flames. In addition to the historic loss of life, the Camp Fire blaze is also more destructive than any other on record, having razed 6,500 homes in the town of Paradise, effectively wiping it off the map.
There's whole neighborhoods that are just gone. Streets, rows and rows and rows. My daughter's house and her mother-in-law and husband's house, every house on the street is just gone. I mean, down to nothing. Yeah, it's horrible.
We will rebuild one step at a time. We will rebuild our home, and we will be a part of rebuilding that town because it's a beautiful town. And I thank you guys so much. Everybody's been so wonderful. We just have to count our blessings and not count the losses right now.
The Camp Fire has reduced around 17 square miles of Butte County's forested hills, mostly to charred wasteland, an area which hasn't seen rainfall of more than half an inch in more than 30 weeks. It's currently 25% contained, according to the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. 3 firefighters have been injured in the effort to quell the blaze's advance. 3 firefighters have been injured in the effort to quell the blaze's advance. Now, at the southern end of the state, another 3 firefighters have been injured battling the Woolsey Fire, which has devoured mansions and mobile homes alike in the coastal celebrity resort of Malibu. The blaze is similar in size to the Camp Fire, but has been much less destructive, and the death toll has been limited to 2 victims found in a vehicle on a private driveway. While some Malibu area residents were allowed to return home late Sunday, the city of Calabasas, just northeast of coastal Malibu, came under evacuation orders.
Eventually we got it under control, but there were no firemen, and then the water stopped around 6:30, and we had no more water, and so the fire came back and we just watched it go.
The bulldozers were cutting a fire line through there, but the wind blew across it, and that firestorm started coming down the hill here, and we had to run to the ocean and then it just blew through here and like a tornado.
This is not the new normal, this is the new abnormal. And this new abnormal will continue, certainly in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years. And unfortunately, the best science is telling us that dryness, warmth, drought, all those things, they're going to intensify.
Renewed violence in Gaza threatened to thwart efforts to end months of unrest as Israeli airstrikes killed 4 Palestinians and destroyed a Hamas TV building, while a barrage of rocket fire from the enclave left 1 dead on Tuesday. The flare-up came after a deadly Israeli Special Forces operation in the Gaza Strip on Sunday that led Hamas to vow revenge. Israel's military said it had so far struck more than 100 militant sites in response to over 370 rockets fired from the Hamas-run territory Monday afternoon into Tuesday morning. The military said missile defenses intercepted more than 100 rockets from Gaza, and most others fell in open areas, though some hit houses and other civilian structures.
Over the last hours, Hamas and other terrorist organizations have fired more than 200 rockets from Gaza towards Israel. Out of those 200, the Iron Dome system has intercepted more than 60, and the rest of the rockets, most of them fell in open terrain. Unfortunately, a few of those rockets also landed inside Israeli cities and have caused damage as well as civilian casualties. These attacks against Israeli civilians are unacceptable, and we will not tolerate them. In response to these attacks, the IDF has targeted over 70 military targets belonging to Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist organizations all over the Gaza Strip. We hold Hamas accountable for any aggression against Israeli civilians, and Hamas, by its actions, is bringing destruction to the Gaza Strip and its environment.
Violence erupted when a covert Israeli mission got exposed in Gaza on Sunday. Palestinians discovered an undercover Israeli unit in a civilian car about 3 kilometers inside the Gaza Strip late on Sunday. A firefight ensued in which the Hamas commander was killed. Israel launched airstrikes and opened fire with tanks on the area. Witnesses said 6 other militants were killed, as well as 1 of the Israeli Special Forces soldiers. Israel had stressed its covert operation on Sunday was an intelligence gathering mission and not an assassination or abduction, but Hamas strongly denounced it and vowed revenge. The outbreak of violence came after months of deadly unrest along the Gaza-Israel border had appeared to be calming. Recent weeks have seen Israel allow Qatar to provide the Gaza Strip with millions of dollars in aid for salaries as well as fuel to help ease an electricity crisis. Before the flare-up, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had defended his decision to allow Doha to transfer the cash despite criticism from within his own government, saying he wanted to avoid a war if it was not necessary. Israel and Palestinian militants in Gaza have fought 3 wars since 2008, and deadly clashes in recent months have raised fears of a 4th.
In other news, a driver who deliberately mowed down shoppers in the heart of Australia's second-largest city, killing 6 people and injuring 27, was found guilty of murder by a jury on Tuesday. James Gergasulas, 28, pleaded not guilty to the January 2017 rampage on Melbourne's Burke Street, which police determined was not terror-related. Burke Street, a popular shopping and restaurant area, was the scene of a deadly knife attack and attempted car bombing last Friday, which police called a terror attack and which left 2 men dead, including the attacker. The Supreme Court jury took less than an hour to find Gergasulas guilty of 33 charges, 6 of murder and 27 of reckless conduct endangering life. Those killed included a 3-month-old baby in a pram, a 10-year-old girl, and a Japanese student. Prosecutor Kerry Judd earlier told the jury that this is the clearest case of criminal liability that you will ever come across. Gargasulas had told the court on Monday that he apologized from the heart from his actions. Quote, "But that's not going to fix anything if I say sorry. Neither will a lengthy sentence fix what I've done." He did not deny his involvement in the carnage which took place near Melbourne Park, where top tennis stars were playing in the opening Grand Slam of the year, and went on a rant speaking about premonitions, with the judge having to interrupt him. A plea hearing is scheduled for January 29 next year. Now, the court heard police had been pursuing him for 12 hours prior to the tragedy after he stabbed his brother with a kitchen knife at their mother's home in Windsor in Melbourne's inner southeast. Police had been following him in unmarked police cars through several Melbourne suburbs for an hour in the morning, and then began a police pursuit which was called off after 1 minute due to safety concerns. The court heard police were ordered not to pursue Gargalas's car then over concerns he would drive even faster and a member of the public would be hurt. Bystanders also gave evidence about the frantic scenes on Burke Street then as the car drove through crowds of people.
Oh my God!
11 boys perished and another 20 suffered severe burns in a fire that gutted their dormitories in Uganda while they slept, police said Monday. Henry Nusubuga, headmaster of the school in Rakai in southern Uganda, said he suspected some students who had been expelled recently were behind the heinous act. The fire ripped through the St. Bernard Secondary School in Rakai on Sunday night. He said the arsonists first locked the doors of the dormitories before setting them on fire.
Because the one who did it came and put a padlock on these 2 rooms. He put 2 padlocks on these 2 rooms and then burned. So it was a little bit difficult for the students to get out of the what? 9 bodies have been recovered and over 30 students who were rescued from the tragedy were taken to various hospitals in Masaka. They are undergoing treatment.
Nuwamanya said the cause of the fire had yet to be established and that 3 people, including a guard at the school, had been arrested for questioning. The Rakai district lies about 280 kilometers south of the capital Kampala, near the border with Tanzania.
Efforts are being made to step up life-saving aid from 8 million to 14 million stricken Yemenis a month, the World Food Programme said before urging warring parties to spare the key Red Sea port of Hodeidah. The UN Relief Agency made the appeal amid a renewed spike of fighting around Hodeidah city and its port, which receives up to 70% of the country's aid. In Geneva, WFP spokesperson Hervé Verheussel said that Yemen risked becoming a country of living ghosts unless fighting ceased between government forces and Houthi opposition militia who've clashed since March 2015.
Yes, we are more or less confident that we can still import the food that we want. Obviously, the port needs to stay open. Today, we have enough stock in the country for in the country for the urgent need of this month and next month. But for the future, with the of course the plans that we have to reach many more million people, we will need more access, more facilities.
The The UN has warned repeatedly that Yemen is already the largest hunger crisis in the world, with millions of people living on the edge of famine in one of the poorest countries on the planet. Youngsters are particularly at risk in Hodeidah and neighboring governorates, according to UN Children's Fund UNICEF, where they account for 40% of the 400,000 children in Yemen who suffer from severe acute malnutrition.
On the humanitarian side, the situation is desperate. We must do all we can to prevent the already dire conditions from deteriorating into the worst famine we have seen in decades. My objective is to strongly appeal to the parties to the conflict to understand that there is an opportunity that must be seized, and to say that the humanitarian situation is so dire that if that doesn't happen, we must have indeed next year a situation of famine that is unprecedented in the last decades.
All right, to other news now. Arizona Republican Martha McSally concedes her razor-thin U.S. Senate race, providing Democrats a key pickup in a state that has not elected a Democrat to the Senate in 3 decades. Take a look.
Hey everybody, I just called Kyrsten Sinema and congratulated her on becoming Arizona's first female senator after a hard-fought battle. I wish her all success as she represents Arizona in the Senate. And I also want to say thank you to everybody who supported
U.S. networks Fox and CNN called the race in Sinema's favor. She will replace the retiring Senator Jeff Flake, a conservative Republican who is a critic of President Trump. The victory by Sinema, an Arizona congresswoman, will provide Democrats a critical extra vote in the 100-member chamber, which Republicans will still control when the dust settles from last week's closely watched midterm elections.
By the many people that I met. And I am convinced Arizona is the best state in the country, and
The scandal-ridden Military Intelligence Command had floated the idea of leaving the Seawall ferry underwater to address worsening public sentiment over former President Park Geun-hye's handling of the sinking. Hanani Sabado reports from Seoul.
On April 16, 2014, the sinking of the passenger ferry Sewol had claimed more than 300 lives of passengers and crew on board. Bereaved families demanded the recovery of the sunken ship in hopes of finding those that went missing. Sewol was recovered in March of 2017, but recent investigations uncovered that a military intelligence command had recommended that the ship be left underwater to tackle the public views of how former President Park Geun-hye mishandled the situation. The idea was to distract the public's attention from the tragedy that left over 300 either dead or missing. In July of this year, the Ministry of National Defense was directed by President Moon Jae-in to run a detailed investigation on the accusations that the Defense Security Command, or DSC, performed illegal surveillance on the victims' families under the order of former President Park. The investigation team lead, John Ik-soo, stated that, "We have learned that the Defense Security Command collected intelligence about family members of the victims to convince them about the need to stop recovering the Sewol ferry and missing people." 4 senior uniformed officers, to include 2 general levels, has been accused in taking part in issuing commands of the illicit surveillance. Investigators found that the DSC officials pretended to be a victim's family member in order to collect private information such as political preference, drinking habits, and relationships. The investigation team said It is a case in which the DSC illicitly surveilled civilians, including the families of the ferry victims, in an organized manner, under the name of aiding the President's governing authority. The Defense Security Command was replaced in September by the Defense Security Support Command due its scandal-filled reputation.
This is Hanani Sabado, EBC correspondent from South Korea, and I am 1 with 25.
Prosecutors and defense lawyers are set to deliver opening statements Tuesday in the New York trial of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, one of the world's most notorious criminals accused of spending a quarter of a century smuggling cocaine into the United States. 12 jurors and 6 alternates were selected last week from a pool of dozens that saw several dismissed because they feared for their lives if they were impaneled, and another who suffered a panic attack. The 7 women and 5 men will determine whether Guzman is guilty on 11 trafficking, firearms, and money laundering charges during what is expected to be more than a 4-month trial. Guzman is accused of leading the Sinaloa cartel and turning it into the largest criminal organization on the planet. He was extradited to the United States in 2017 after twice escaping from prison in Mexico. The 61-year-old is considered the world's largest drug trafficker since the death of Colombia's Pablo Escobar. Prosecutors say that from 1989 to 2014, the cartel smuggled 340,892 pounds of cocaine into the U.S., as well as heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana, raking in $14 billion. Last week, Judge Brian Cogan rejected the request from Guzman to greet and embrace his beauty queen wife, Emma Coronel, on Tuesday, shortly before opening statements, ruling that it was too risky. The defendant is banned from communicating with or having any physical contact with the 29-year-old mother of his 7-year-old twin girls. Cogan said the requested hug violated security procedures designed to prevent Guzman from coordinating any escape from prison or directing any attack on cooperating witnesses. Guzman twice escaped from prison in Mexico, once hidden in a laundry cart, and the second time slipping down a tunnel that reached his prison shower.
Eagle News International will be right back.
Rated G, good for all.
No,
Oops, rated PG. Dapat may mga magulang para sagutin ang mga tanong ng kabataan.
Grabe! Rated SPG! Maselan!
Itan ang paggabay.
Pag rated MTRCB, rated responsable.
Join the EBC Family Fun Run November 18, 2018 at the Ciudad de Victoria Complex, Bulacan. Choose from race categories: 1.062 kilometer, 2.5 kilometers, 5 kilometers, and 9.55 kilometers. Registration is ongoing. For more details, log on to www.eaglenews.ph/EBC Fun Run or call 784-7450, local 1162. You may also visit www.facebook.com/EBC Fun Run. EBC Family Fun Run.
Prime Minister Theresa May on Tuesday faced her divided ministers as negotiators scrambled to secure a divorce agreement with the European Union, and anxiety mounted over the risk of a no-deal Brexit. May said Monday her government was working extremely hard to save the deal.
The negotiations for our departure are now in the endgame, and we are working extremely hard through the night to make progress on the remaining issues in the withdrawal agreement, which are significant.
A British government source said a deal must happen by Wednesday if there is any hope of an extraordinary EU summit this month to sign a withdrawal agreement. May addressed City of London leaders on Monday, saying her negotiators were working through the night to make progress on the remaining issues.
The Brexit talks are not about me or my personal fortunes. They are about the national interest. And that means making what I believe to be the right choices, not the easy ones. This will not be an agreement at any cost. Any deal must ensure we take back control of our laws, borders and money. It must secure the ability to strike new trade deals around the world. And it must also be a deal that protects jobs, our security and our precious union. We will have a new relationship with the EU when we have left, but it will still be a close one. We will still be neighbours, championing the same values of freedom, democracy and the rule of law, underpinned by a rules-based global order.
At issue is how to avoid border checks between British Northern Ireland and EU member the Republic of Ireland after Brexit enters into a force on March 29. London suggests Britain could temporarily stay aligned with the bloc's trade rules, but wants to reserve the right to exit the arrangement. Failure to strike a deal by Wednesday could push back the signing of any agreement until a regular EU summit on December 13, dramatically curtailing the time May will have to get the deal past a rebellious British Parliament before Brexit Day on March 29. The deal is meant to finalize Britain's exit bill of around 39 billion euros, or that's 45 billion, or 39 billion pounds, or that's 45 billion euros, and $50 billion. It must also guarantee citizens' rights and launch a 21-month transition during which London would follow EU rules.
Japan and the United States will negotiate a bilateral trade agreement that will serve as a model for other countries, according to U.S. Vice President Mike Pence in Tokyo. Speaking after talks with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, He reiterated Washington's position that U.S. businesses have faced unfair obstacles in Japan. He said the United States has had a trade imbalance with Japan for too long. American products and services too often face barriers to compete fairly in Japanese markets, he said, standing alongside Abe. Abe and U.S. President Donald Trump agreed in September to negotiate a trade pact, easing fears that Japan could be next in line in the White House's tariff offensive. President Trump withdrew from the TPP shortly after taking office and has been vocal about his preference for bilateral deals negotiated on terms more favorable for Washington. Now, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe had hoped to see Washington return to the TPP, but agreed to the negotiations expected to begin in January.
Became Vice President
Taiwan Excellence took part in the country's biggest expo of its kind. Philconstruct Visitors has witnessed Taiwan Excellence as one of its exhibitors, an organization that reviews and recognizes all Taiwanese products and grants awards to products that are found to be exceptionally superior. During this year's Philconstruct Expo, Taiwan Excellence has proudly exhibited their most elite brands on site. They also hosted a seminar discussing the strengths and benefits of their featured brands, carrying the theme Smart Constructions for Smart Cities. 21 forward-thinking Taiwanese company brand innovators in the construction industry represented Taiwan Excellence during Philconstruct. Touted as the biggest expo of its kind in the Philippines, Philconstruct has been defining the landscape of building and construction in the country for over 2 decades. It now serves as the annual meeting place for the industry's movers and shakers, gathering hundreds of the leading suppliers and thousands of trade buyers in one venue. Philconstruct held its final leg for 2018 in Manila at the SMX Convention Center, Pasay City World Trade Center from November 8 to 11, 2018.
We sell an energy management system that can save up to 25% of the air conditioning costs in a building. The air conditioning consumption in a building can be up to 70% of the total electrical consumption, and we can save a minimum of 20% of that.
This hydropower sensor can also power your urinals and also your water closets.
We are very excited to be here to introduce our pleated screens. We solve lots of problems because we can prevent mosquitoes and bugs inside your house. So you don't have to kill them with your hands or any other additional tools. If you want to have a better view, we recommend to use a flat screen, and you can actually control with a remote control if you have a very high window and you still want to install our screens.
For our ventilation fans, it's usually have different series here that we market in the Philippines, and we are present in different depots already, and we have an exclusive distributor in the Philippines.
The ASEAN 2018 summit opened in Singapore. In his opening remarks, Singaporean Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong says ASEAN member nations are still able to work together despite countries, including major powers, are repudiating multilateral approaches. Take a look.
How can ASEAN stay united, effective and relevant for our peoples and our partners? This question is especially pertinent given the rapidly changing external environment. The international order is at a turning point. The existing free, open and rules-based multilateral system, which has underpinned ASEAN's growth and stability, has come under stress. Countries, including major powers, are resorting to unilateral actions and bilateral deals, and even explicitly repudiating multilateral approaches and institutions. It is unclear if the world will settle into new rules and norms of international engagement, or whether the international order will break up into rival blocs. These strategic trends of big power competition and these shifts against multilateralism are pulling ASEAN member states in different directions. Each member state has its own strategic outlook, its own political calculations, and national interests. Despite this, ASEAN has shown that it is still able to work together and find common ground. And this is because ASEAN's of the conviction of ASEAN members that ASEAN is greater than the sum of its parts. By coming together in one collective voice, instead of going our separate ways as 10 disparate countries, ASEAN members have strengthened our standing in the world. Through ASEAN, we've been able to engage and cooperate with major countries and international organizations, using various ASEAN-centric platforms, such as the ASEAN Plus 3 and the East Asia Summit. With a growing middle class and a young workforce, ASEAN is slated to become the world's 4th largest economy by 2030. ASEAN's future is bright. At the same time, ASEAN has to address new challenges. Apart from the new strategic landscape, another major shift has been digital technology. Digital technology has disrupted our economies and dramatically changed how we live, work, and interact with one another. It has also made us more susceptible to cyber attacks. Meanwhile, non-traditional and transnational threats, including terrorism and climate change, are looming on the horizon. Terrorism is not just an issue of physical security, but also a grave threat to the delicate multi-ethnic and multi-religious social fabric of many ASEAN countries. Climate change is rendering ASEAN countries vulnerable to rising sea levels because of our long coastlines and low-lying areas. Higher temperatures and extreme weather are affecting our crop yields, spreading tropical diseases, and threatening the lives and livelihoods of our peoples. All these mean that multilateral cooperation is now more urgent than ever. These common challenges are complex and unprecedented. No single solution applies to all of us or all of these problems, and yet no country can deal with them alone. We need to pool our ideas and resources to tackle these issues together. And this is why Singapore chose resilience and innovation as the themes for our ASEAN chairmanship. We wanted to build up our collective defenses against these challenges.
Meanwhile, Myanmar's Aung San Suu Kyi implored foreign investors to take a punt on her country, Southeast Asia's final frontier, but warned its resources are not open for exploitation at the cost of its people. Suu Kyi's image as an upholder of human rights and that of her country has been decimated by the Rohingya crisis. Speaking at a business forum in Singapore ahead of a regional summit, she did not address the crisis which has sent hundreds of thousands of the Muslim minority into Bangladesh and extinguished optimism in some corners over Myanmar's future. Rumblings of the potential re-imposition of some Western sanctions over the treatment of Rohingya have also darkened the economic outlook of the country, or for the country. But Suu Kyi was at pain to say Myanmar was still open for business.
Myanmar's re-emergence comes at a time when the world is facing rising protectionist sentiments, a shift away from multilateralism in favor of bilateralism, and in some cases even isolationism, and amidst currency and trade tensions between some countries. Unlike 10 years ago, today Myanmar is exposed to these global macroeconomic shifts in ways never before experienced. It's been difficult for us to cope in some ways, but it's unavoidable if we want to enter the mainstream of the world economy. Singapore is way ahead of us now. Although, mind you, at one time we were ahead of Singapore, and I keep saying that we've got not only to catch up, but to overtake Singapore, because this is what Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew said long time ago when Singapore was a newly independent nation, that in 20 years we'll catch up with Burma as we were then.
Finance Corporation. The new thought... The Rohingya say that they return to Myanmar, Mrs. Xi.
Amnesty International stripped Aung San Suu Kyi of its highest honor over the de facto Myanmar leader's indifference to the atrocities committed by the military against Rohingya Muslims. The London-based Global Human Rights Organization said it has written to Ms. Suu Kyi, saying it's withdrawing its prize, the highest honor award, because, as they put it, we can no longer justify her status as an ambassador of conscience. Suu Kyi was globally hailed as a freedom fighter who stood up to her country's feared military junta while spending 15 years under house arrest. Her plight received added attention when she was visited by Hillary Clinton when the two-time U.S. presidential candidate was still Secretary of State in 2011. Suu Kyi then reaffirmed her commitment to working with the United States to bring democracy to her country of around 50 million people. But her tenure has been marred by a failure to speak up for the Rohingya Muslims. She has since faced international pressure, including from Amnesty International, to condemn the army's alleged brutality against the Rohingya. However, she has refused to do so.
A rule book to settle disputes in the hotly contested South China Sea should be finished in 3 years, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang said on Tuesday, insisting his nation does not seek hegemony or expansion. Li's comments appeared to be the first clear time frame for finishing the Code of Conduct. Talks have dragged on for years, with China accused of delaying progress as it prefers to deal with less powerful countries on a one-on-one basis. Ownership of islands and waters in the South China Sea is disputed by several nations. Beijing and the 10-member Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, have for years sought to hammer out a code to govern disputes in the disputed waters, but the process has moved slowly. Speaking in Singapore ahead of the opening of an ASEAN summit, Li said it is China's hope that the Code of Conduct or consultation will be finished in 3 years' time, so that it will contribute to enduring peace and stability in the South China Sea. China and Southeast Asian nations announced in August that they had agreed on their initial bargaining positions as they worked towards a code. While both sides hailed it as a vital step, critics said that some of Beijing's proposals in the agreement were clearly aimed at expanding its influence in the region at the expense of Washington. Navies from China and Southeast Asia also staged their first joint drills last month in the South China Sea, which is crisscrossed by busy shipping lanes and home to abundant natural resources in an effort to ease tensions. Opposition has weakened in many parts of Southeast Asia to China's aggressive behavior in the waters in recent years, with countries keen to attract investment from Beijing and worried about U.S. commitment to the region under President Donald Trump.
All right, we'll head for another short break. Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
Fun Run, November 18, 2018, at the Ciudad de Victoria Complex, Bulacan. Choose from race categories: 1.062 kilometer, 2.5 kilometers, 5 kilometers, and 9.55 kilometers. Registration is ongoing. For more details, log on to www.eaglenews.ph/EBC Funrun or call 784-7450, local 1162. You may also visit www.facebook.com/EBC Funrun. EBC Family Fun Run.
This event was made possible with our major sponsors: Regent, Life's Simple Pleasures, RY Graphics and Print, Guyamax, the natural 4-in-1 super antioxidant with guayabano mangosteen, turmeric, and vitamin C. With the participation of Isuzu, your responsible partner for life, together building people. Mr. Gary Escobar, Salonpas by Hisamitsu Philippines, Skechers Performance, White Glow, Australia's #1 teeth whitening system. Beldia, your strategic procurement partner. Blue Pro Energy Plus Electrolytes. Enjoying your passion never stops. And in partnership with Maligaya Development Corporation and Philippine Red Cross.
Health is our most
Fun Run, November 18, 2018, at the Ciudad de Victoria Complex, Bulacan. Choose from race categories: 1.062 kilometer, 2.5 kilometers, 5 kilometers, and 9.55 kilometers. Registration is ongoing. For more details, log on to www.eaglenews.ph/EBC Funrun or call 784-7450, local 1162. You may also visit www.facebook.com/EBC Funrun. EBC Family Fun Run.
This event was made possible with our sponsors: Guyamax, the natural 4-in-1 super antioxidant with guayabano mangosteen, turmeric, and vitamin C. Skechers Performance, White Glow, Australia's #1 teeth whitening system. Beldia, your strategic procurement partner. Blue Pro Energy Plus Electrolytes. Enjoying your passion never stops. And in partnership with Maligaya Development Corporation and Philippine Red Cross.
health is our most
Marvel legend Stan Lee, who revolutionized pop culture as the co-creator of iconic superheroes like Spider-Man and the Hulk, who now dominate the world's movie screens, has died. He was 95 years old. Lee, the face of comic book culture in the U.S., died early Monday in Los Angeles after suffering a number of illnesses in recent years. Take a look.
Industry as we know it in comic book shops and these like really iconic characters, they wouldn't exist on the scale that they do, and they wouldn't have the level of success that they do without Stan Lee. Or even if they're not making the right decision, it's showing you a path that, even if it's a path that you shouldn't take, it's showing you specific decisions, and it can be instructive in that way. So I think Stan's legacy is ultimately to make human society function better.
If it wasn't for those characters, there's a lot of people that could have turned out differently. I know personally that the Hulk, Spider-Man, were kind of morphed my persona. In general, in all of comics, you can't replace Stan Lee. I know there's DC, Dark Horse, and all that, but even they know that Stan Lee can't be replaced.
Proud right away. He wanted to get people an older readership, and I think that was very, I mean, for one, great storytelling, but it turned out to be great marketing. You have people who grow up with these, they carry it into their adult lives, they pass it down to their children, and over 50 years later, here we are still talking about funny books he wrote back in the 60s.
They can be broke, they can be destroyed, they can be broken, but at the same time, it's what he does with that brokenness and overcoming the obstacles that these characters have to basically rise out of their desperate situations and become a hero and continue to save the world and continue to help others and carry on through inspiring so many people as well too with those acts of heroism.
Tributes poured into Stan Lee, the co-creator of iconic superheroes including Spider-Man, the Hulk, and X-Men, following his death at age 95. Watch this.
Thank you for the adventures that his stories took us all on.
Thank you for the fun. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards and Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles and
we're one with 25.